Dawn rose over the Philippine Sea on October 23, 1944, calm and deceptively gentle. A thin gray mist drifted above the water, softening the line between sea and sky. To the sailors moving across their decks that morning, nothing seemed unusual. No one could sense the storm that history was preparing, a storm that would soon engulf nearly 300 ships across hundreds of miles of ocean. What was coming was more than a battle. It was the moment the Japanese Empire made its final, desperate bid to turn back the Allied tide. A last gamble, bold, complex, and doomed. In just 3 days, the world would witness the largest naval battle in human history, a clash involving 4 separate engagements, thousands of aircraft, and fleets so massive that even commanders struggled to comprehend the scale. And at its heart, the sinking of giants. The last battleship duel ever fought. And one of the most heroic defensive stands ever recorded. This is the story of Leyte Gulf, the battle that crushed Japan's fleet forever. By late 1944, Japan was cornered. Mariana Islands had fallen. Its supply lines were collapsing. And now U.S. forces had landed in the Philippines, a critical blow. If the Allies took the Philippines, Japan would lose its access to the oil fields of Southeast Asia. Without oil, the Imperial Navy battleships, carriers, submarines would be nothing more than drifting metal. Japan had one final chance. Operation Shogo. A daring plan to lure American carriers away from Leyte while Japanese battleships and cruisers slipped in and destroyed the landing forces. It was dramatic. It was bold, and it had almost no chance of succeeding. On October 23, Kurita's center force, the main Japanese attack group, moved through the Palawan Passage. Suddenly, American submarines Darter and Dace attacked. Torpedoes ripped through the heavy cruiser Atago, Kurita's flagship. Within minutes she capsized. Another cruiser, Maya, was blown apart. Taka was crippled and forced to retreat. Before the battle even began, Japan lost 3 key cruisers. But Kurita pushed onward, battered, furious, and determined to complete the mission. The next day, the center force entered the Sibian Sea. Waiting overhead were waves of American carrier aircraft. Their target, Musashi, one of the largest battleships ever built.
Gee!
Dive bombers swooped down through columns of anti-aircraft fire.
Torpedoes!
Streaked toward her hull. Explosions tore open her sides. Attack after attack slammed into the giant ship, so many that pilots later said the ocean looked like it was boiling around her. After hours of punishment, the great battleship slowly rolled over and slipped beneath the waves. More than 1,000 sailors died. And yet, Kurita still pressed forward. His brief retreat was misinterpreted by American commanders, leading directly to the most controversial decision of the Pacific War. Far to the north, Admiral Ozawa's Japanese carriers appeared nearly empty of aircraft, but dangerous-looking enough to serve as the decoy they were meant to be. Admiral William Bullhalsey saw an irresistible opportunity: destroy Japan's carriers once and for all. Leaving Kurita was no longer a threat. Halsey took his entire fast carrier force north, leaving the San Bernardino straight unguarded. This move opened a deadly gap. And through that gap, Kurita's battleships began to slip. Meanwhile, the lightly armed escort carriers and destroyers of Taffy III Asani to protect the landing forces had no idea that an entire Japanese battleship fleet was heading straight toward them. That would change at dawn. Before dawn brought terror to Taffy III, the southern prong of Japan's attack faced its own doom. Admiral Nishimura attempted to charge through Surigao Strait, a narrow funnel of water. American PT boats pounced first, followed by destroyers launching torpedo attacks from both sides. Then came Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's battle line, a row of U.S. battleships, many resurrected after Pearl Harbor. For the last time in naval history, battleships engaged in a classic, crossing the T. Japanese ships were caught in a blazing wall of fire. Within minutes, Nishimura's force was destroyed. One arm of Japan's plan was gone. Another was moving north. And the most dramatic moment of Leyte Gulf was about to begin. October 25, 1944. Dawn. Lookouts aboard the escort carrier, Fanshawe Bay, spotted large shapes on the horizon. At first, they assumed they were friendly cruisers. Then the water around them erupted in towering plumes of shellfire. The unimaginable had happened. Kurita's center force, the battleships Yamato, Nagato, Kongu plus cruisers and destroyers had found them. Taffy III consisted of 6 small escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. They were built for anti-submarine patrols, not for fighting battleships. They chose to fight. Commander Ernest Evans aboard the destroyer USS Johnston gave the order: General Quarters, prepare to attack. His ship raced forward alone, charging a force 10 times its size. Torpedoes from the Johnston blew the bow off the cruiser Kumano. The destroyers Hull and Heermann attacked next, zigzagging through explosions, launching torpedoes, firing their 5-inch guns as fast as they could reload. The smaller destroyer escort, Samuel B. Roberts, known as the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship, charged at full speed, firing so rapidly that her guns overheated. Meanwhile, aircraft launched from Taffy 3's carriers, many armed only with depth charges and machine guns, dove on Japanese battleships and cruisers, distracting and confusing them. Some pilots pretended to attack even after running out of ammunition. The ferocity of the American defense shocked Kurita. Smoke, torpedoes, aircraft, and determined small ships made it impossible to identify the enemy. He became convinced he was facing far more powerful forces. At 9:20 a.m., unsure of the situation and having lost several cruisers, Kurita made one of the most debated decisions in naval history. He ordered his fleet to retreat. Taffy 3, hopelessly outgunned, severely battered, had turned back the largest surface fleet Japan had left. It was one of the most heroic stands ever fought on the sea. Far to the north, Halsey finally crushed Ozawa's decoy force. American aircraft swarmed the nearly empty carriers. Zuikaku, last survivor of the Pearl Harbor raid, sank under a hail of bombs. Only then did Halsey realize his mistake and race south. But it was too late. The men of Taffy 3 had already paid the price. By October 26th, Leyte Gulf was over. Japan had lost 1 massive battleship Musashi, 3 light carriers, 10 cruisers, and destroyers, hundreds of aircraft, and most importantly, the ability to ever again mount a major naval offensive, the Imperial Navy, once the pride of Japan was finished. Leyte Gulf was the turning point. From here, the road to Japan's defeat lay wide open. Leyte Gulf was more than a clash of steel and strategy. It was a battle where small ships charged giants, where pilots attacked with empty guns, where courage rewrote the fate of nations. The story of Taffy 3, and of the sailors who fought with impossible bravery, remains one of the greatest legends in naval history. And the result was decisive. In October 1944, the Allied Navy crushed Japan's fleet and changed the course of the Pacific War forever.